Hello, comrades, it's the Finnish Bolshevik. I just have my coffee here. I will put it there for now. A bit of a different video this time. I'm gonna be quickly just showing my fiction library. Yeah, I'm making this video for a couple of reasons. Well, I already made the Marxist bookshelf tour a while back. I've gotten a bunch of books since then, so I might do an update on that at some point. And I also want some variety on my channel, so I thought that this would be variety. But also, I've just been so busy that I thought that this would be a bit of an easier, faster video to make, because I do want to release 2 videos a month, but I've been working on the Soviet architecture series, and that should be the next one that I release. But it takes so much effort that I don't think I'll be able to finish it in time. It would be like way delayed, and I also don't want to rush it. So I thought, why not? Let's just do this. And also, lately, I've been watching some like BookTube videos. Maybe I'm just in a weird part of BookTube, because a lot of those people, to me, they seem like really right-wing and really like kind of silly, in my opinion. Like, I saw this one guy who was saying like, oh, you should read classic literature because it's like self-improvement. It's self-improvement, self-help, self-development, whatever the term is, and it's gonna help you with your like family relationships or something. It's just, I think that's pretty silly. Like, they just think that classical literature is cool, and they try to find a reason why it's cool. I have a very different take. My view of literature, obviously, as a communist, is very different. Literature and art isn't just about like the artist being, oh, I just want to express myself and then I just make something and it's purely just for me and nothing else, and it's detached from society and whatnot. Karl Marx said that society is divided into 2 parts. There's a base and a superstructure. The base is composed of mainly the economy, how do people live, the material foundations for human existence, and then the superstructure is everything that arises on top of it, which includes the ideological climate, the politics, the religion, the philosophy, the art, the culture. Basically, material base is where do people get food, how do they survive, and superstructure is what do people think about, the mental aspect of society. And art is a specific form of social consciousness. It's a specific form of the superstructure. So art reflects society, and some artists, they do it more or less unconsciously, some of them do it very consciously. Some art reflects society very accurately and truthfully, and such art Marxism considers realistic art and progressive art and good art, whereas there's other art which gives like a really dishonest, deceptive, deceiving view of society, where society is going, what people should do, and such art Marxism considers reactionary. As an example, these are sort of historical entertainment novels written by a Finnish author named Topelius. There's another Finnish author named Valtari. Topelius is from the 1800s, Valtari is from the 1900s. They've both written about similar topics partially. And Valtari is considered a good artist, even a great artist, whereas Topelius is also appreciated but not held up to quite the same standard these days. And I think that's completely wrong, because regardless of any differences in the genre and any differences in those kinds of things, and even regardless of technical skill, the main point of, for example, this work, which I'll get to in just a moment, but like one of the main points of this work is that history moves forward and that there's progress, and that progress towards enlightenment and science and away from the Dark Ages, that's good. That's one of the main messages of this book. Whereas in the works of Valtari, he has a famous book about Egypt. The main point of that book is that everything always stays the same and nothing ever changes. So Topelius has a dialectical, progressive outlook, whereas Valtari has a metaphysical and reactionary outlook. Now, some people might say that they like this or that book, or they like this or that author, but that's a bit beside the point. Personal preference is one thing. What kind of art is actually advancing humanity is another, more objective thing that obviously we can debate about, but it's still more objective than just personal preference. And obviously, art and literature have changed a lot during the course of history. Let's take somebody like Shakespeare. Like, Shakespeare doesn't have a clear political tendency, although he is actually fighting against feudalism. He's oftentimes fighting against the sort of chaos and disunity caused by the feudal vassal system, and other things like that. I think Hamlet is a tragedy precisely because Hamlet wants a better society, but the economic conditions at the time were such that any kind of better society was impossible, hence it is a tragedy. Romeo and Juliet is also a similar thing, and it's cleverly constructed because by making it a tragedy, Shakespeare kind of makes the people think, well, I wish that it wasn't a tragedy. I wish that the people could actually achieve what they want, so it actually brings people to the side of the progressive revolutionary masses. But only with the rise of full-blown capitalism, you start to get literature that has what Engels calls a political tendency. He says that it's tendentious literature. Here we have a clear political divide. The capitalists, they say that art shouldn't have any message, that it should just be art for art's sake. Why do they say that? Well, because they don't want people to understand what's going on. They say that we should just have art for art's sake, just make art without any kind of meaning or point or message. It's basically just mindless entertainment, except it's usually for rich people. You get like lowbrow, stupid entertainment for the masses, and then you have this weird, decadent, like strange stuff for the millionaires. It's also just sold on the speculative art market for millions. So the bourgeoisie says that art shouldn't have a message, it should just be art for art's sake. And they also say that political art is bad, and that any kind of art with a political tendency is bad. If it has a capitalist tendency, then they don't really criticize it. But definitely if it has an anti-capitalist or any kind of democratic or progressive tendency, then they will say that it's terrible. There are exceptions that have defeated the criticism, but they're rare. And the capitalist class always says that, like, if the art is political, if it has a message, it's always bad, it's just propaganda, it's just, propaganda is always terrible. But look at all the greatest art throughout history. Like, half the stuff they made in the Baroque was propaganda paid for by the church. Or like the music of Beethoven or Berlioz, it's propaganda for the revolution. But the bourgeoisie, they will try to hide that fact, they will ignore it. So I don't think that the point of literature is to, oh yeah, you read Charles Dickens or you'll read Sophocles or something, and it's gonna make your interactions with your friends better, or it's gonna make you sleep better at night, or I don't even know, it's gonna like help you find inner calm. Like, no, of course, art has various functions. People want and need entertainment to a certain extent. People want art that expresses various emotions. Aristotle talks about that, he calls it catharsis. So there's all these different things that, these different functions that art has to serve. And people also want to produce art. That's why art exists. People want to make it. But really, what art should be doing, this is Resurrection by Tolstoy, what it should be doing is it needs to show people what society is actually like, how things work, what's good about it, what's wrong with it, how do we fix it. But art oftentimes doesn't do that very simplistically or explicitly because art is complicated. But read Resurrection by Tolstoy, for example. Tolstoy, he's making a political argument. As a Marxist, I agree with a lot of it, although not all of it. Mainly, I don't agree with Tolstoy's religious claims. But other than that, he is spot on. This is actually a very, elaborate and nuanced book. But it depicts the society of the time absolutely accurately. And I don't mean, with all the little details and minutiae. No, I mean the big picture. The big picture is absolutely accurate. A lot of people get caught up in the minutiae, like, are all the historical little trivial details completely correct? That's meaningless. You can have all the little details completely correct, and then the main sentiment and the main big picture is still completely warped. Whereas Shakespeare, the historical details are always wrong. He doesn't even care about them. They're playing billiards in ancient Egypt or something. But the main picture is truthful. It tells people how society actually is and what they need to do. And that's what art actually is. Art is a great achievement of human civilization, but it's also a weapon in the struggle for progress. It's a weapon in class struggle, but even more broadly than that, it's a weapon in the struggle for progress. It would be irresponsible for an artist to just think, oh, I'm just writing this for myself, or I'm just writing this so that some middle-class guy can use it as some kind of silly self-help, Jordan Peterson, I'm gonna clean my room kind of thing. it's about much bigger things than that. Like, it's so absurd. Like, do you think that when Shakespeare was writing, he was thinking, oh yeah, some guy's gonna read Hamlet and he's gonna clean his room because of it? Or when he was writing Macbeth, like, is Macbeth about criticizing feudal disunity, or is it about inspiring some guy like to start working out or cleaning his room or something? You know, not to go on too much of a side tangent, but a lot of people say that Macbeth is just a critique of power in the abstract, like power corrupts, and if you use ruthless methods, it's just going to corrupt you. And yeah, that's possibly one part of what it's about. But I also think it's more than that. I think Shakespeare is more talking about the fact that that was kind of inbuilt into the system of the time. In a different kind of system, that wouldn't necessarily happen. But in the feudal system that they had at the time, okay, you can overthrow a tyrant or overthrow a feudal warlord, but in the context of the system, what's going to happen? You're just going to have to replace him and you'll become a warlord in his place. I'll also say something about my like book collecting philosophy or my approach to book collecting as we go through. I haven't really had time to play many video games for years. I played a little bit of Minecraft and a little bit of this or that, like occasionally, but I haven't really properly been gaming for years and years, and I haven't been in like collecting games or something. But I just recently like saw some game collecting videos, and like I just noticed this like really funny trend where people were saying like, I've been making game collecting content for years, and then they have a million videos about it, and then it's like, oh, game collecting ruined my life. I spent thousands and tens of thousands of dollars on games, and my whole house is full of games. I don't have space for anything. It's like a giant game hoard, and it's like game collecting ruined my life. I'm quitting game collecting. Every video is like super like sensational. Like, I got rid of all my games because game collecting destroyed my life. And like, okay, and then after that, the next video that comes out is like, now I regret selling my games. I don't know why I'm bringing that up, but I just think it's really funny. Yeah, don't do that. Obviously, these are not games, these are books, but like, don't take any kind of collecting don't take it like that. And also about, yeah, this is my fiction stuff, but I have a ton of like H.P. Lovecraft and other kinds of horror books, like Bram Stoker's Dracula, Frankenstein. All like, I used to be really into that at like the end of middle school, beginning of high school, and into H.P. Lovecraft and that kind of stuff, like even years after that. But I'm not going to go into that in this video. I'm not going to show my Lovecraft books, although I randomly have one here. Lovecraft, A Look Behind the Cthulhu Mythos by Lynn Carter. But other than that, I don't have them here. They're in boxes somewhere, and I'm not going to really go into that. But I have so many, like, basically I have complete works of Lovecraft. I have so many of his, like, letters, and he wrote a lot of letters. A ton of Lovecraft scholarship and, like, other kinds of Cthulhu content by other writers, but I'm not going to go into any of that. This is only my, like, good literature. This is only, like, art, whereas I don't really consider H.P. Lovecraft to be, like, really art or really good literature. It's more like entertainment. Some people will be offended by that statement. Same goes for like Bram Stoker and a lot of other horror stuff, although not entirely. Some of that is actually really good stuff written by like really great writers, such as even Charles Dickens has written at least one ghost story, maybe several. And horror literature like Frankenstein and Dracula, those are obviously sort of tied to Gothic literature, and Gothic kind of ties to Romanticism. So it has like a tenuous connection to actual good literature too, but whatever. Let's start going through the books. I wonder what order I should go. Maybe we'll start here. I need another bookshelf. Like, I have a bookshelf of communist stuff here, a new bookshelf. I don't have the one in the old video anymore. Then I have these two shitty little things. And then I have a big bookcase here, but I need at least one more. So these are not in any kind of particular like order of importance or anything. Should I take these out? Fuck it, I'll do it. These are actually picture books. So these are picture books of Soviet paintings and other kinds of Soviet art. This book is called The Great Utopia or The Big Utopia. It's, I think, in Swedish, Russian, and Finnish. And it just has like a lot of pictures of paintings, which you can obviously find them online if you know to look for them. But I think these are cool because they always have stuff that you don't know about. And it does have like a list of works, which is really good. Some of these are really cool. Like these are ornamental figurines and ceramics and stuff. Like really, really cool from different years. I kind of collect these because they have good quality photos. Whereas if you look up stuff on the internet, they don't always have good quality pictures. But also it just has stuff that you don't know about. This is a similar book, but it's a book about Romanian architecture from the People's Democracy period. So Gheorghiu Dej period, Ceausescu period, what have you. Then I have one on Romanian painting. This was published in the Ceausescu period, but it has paintings from like all of Romanian history. That's cool too. And then I have another one called Born of the October Revolution. I think I didn't show these in the political. I also have all these books about. These are similar kinds of like picture books. These are. I have 2 series. These are 6 about the history of Finnish art, and then there's like 5 or 6 about world art. Crap, I think this is one more. Oh yeah, this is pretty cool though. It's called Let Us Create a New World, and it's about Soviet ceramics. But anyway, let's get to the actual stuff. So first here, I have Finnish books. There's a few places that I know where you can get books for free, and I visit them every now and then. And if there's something sort of worth taking, I'll take it. But I think a lot of these are from there. My kind of collecting philosophy is that if I want a book, first I check the library, and then I might scan parts of the book or the whole book, depending if I need to use it later for something. The reason why I do it like that is because, well, first of all, it's free. You can use the library for free. And also, I don't have infinite space. I don't want to just buy everything if I don't have to. So if I can just get it for free, same thing. If I can find it online and read it online, I'll just read it online. I don't buy the book or get the physical book. Physical books are cooler, they're nicer, but they cost money, and more importantly, they take space. However, if they are free, I'll take them. If it's a free book, I'll take it. I can always get rid of it if I need to get rid of it, or more likely I would give it to somebody, or take it back to the book place, because people, the reason you can get books for free from certain places is because they're places where people can dump their books. Kaarlo Isotalo he's a Finnish realist writer of proletarian origin. Telakka or Shipyard is one of his more famous ones, although Tehtaan varjossa, In the Shadow of the Factory, is his most famous one. He's not a communist, and his works are not like flawless, but they are realistic and generally progressive and worthwhile. People can criticize them and analyze them, but they are, in my opinion, worthwhile. Yeah, these ones I've all gotten for free and I haven't read them. Donner, he died recently, or well, pretty recently, but I guess he was kind of like a left social democrat in the 1930s and 40s, and then he became kind of like maybe like new left after that. Even recently, there were some remnants of that ideology in his statements, and his he started making like documentaries and stuff. He's made so many different kinds of things. Most people probably know him more because of his film stuff and not his books, but many of these Finnish writers I know because some of them belonged to a socialist, communist, leftist organization called Kiila, which means wedge, kind of like the Eldizitsky painting, Beat the Whites with the Red Wedge. I think that organization was formed in the 1930s, and then it expanded a lot in the 1940s after the defeat of fascism, when being a communist became legal. Donner is more like a petty bourgeois author. Sillanpää is a bourgeois author, but this book is about the Finnish Revolution. but I have not read it yet. And I think it's probably not great, but since these were free, I got them. See, what else do we have here? Onerva is like neo-romantic poet, I think. And Jotuni, I forget. These ones I've also gotten for free and I haven't read them. There is a Soviet book written by a Soviet Karelian researcher. I think it's called Democratic Finnish Literature of the early 1900s. That talks about the neo-romanticists as well, and also about Onerva. That's kind of where I know them from. However, this one I was glad to find because Maiju Lassila is a very interesting and important person. It's a pseudonym. His real name was Rantamala, but he wrote under several pseudonyms. He wrote a big, sort of like, maybe like a Dostoevsky-esque novel called Harhama, which partially talks about his time in the Russian revolutionary movement and even in the Russian sort of like Narodnik movement in the early 1900s. He was more in like the Narodnik and even terrorist movement in the early 1900s. Then he kind of got out of politics entirely for a decade, and he wrote under the pseudonym Maiju Lassila, which is a woman's name. And his most famous work is called Tulitikkoa lainaamassa, which means borrowing matches, which is a really funny comedy about a guy who goes to his wife says go borrow some matches so we can make a fire, and then he goes and then he's missing for like at least days, maybe weeks, and it's a really funny story, but it's also a great realistic and socially critical story talking about the social conditions of the time among the Finnish peasantry. There's a Soviet Finnish movie about that as well. Then, when the February Revolution happens and the October Revolution happens and the Finnish Revolution approaches, Rantamala comes out of obscurity and he joins the Workers' Party. He becomes very active in the Finnish Red government. He writes a lot of political works, and then he dies as a martyr of the revolution. He's killed by the whites. He dies very bravely, completely fearlessly, a hero's death. And he is one of the greatest Finnish 20th century writers. This is Täällä Pohjantähden alla by Väinö Linna, or Under the North Star by Väinö Linna. It's a famous long trilogy about the Finnish Civil War. Väinö Linna is a complicated figure. He was a very right-wing social democrat in the 40s and 50s. In the 60s, he becomes more leftist. He's most famous for writing The Unknown Soldier, which is it's a book about the continuation war, which the Finnish government continuously uses to make anti-communist and pro-imperialist war propaganda. Even though originally when he wrote it, the book was considered quite leftist, but the bourgeoisie has reinterpreted it to be very right-wing and pro-war, even though it's actually pretty neutral kinda. Although there are some, like, I would say, anti-communist slanderous parts in it, but nonetheless became more leftist in the 60s and wrote about the Civil War from the point of view of a tenant farmer, kind of like a sharecropper. But anyway, we gotta move on. I think this is a biography of Aleksis Kivi, who is maybe the greatest Finnish writer. Aleksis Kivi wrote a book called The Seven Brothers. It had a big role in modernizing Finnish literary language. I should have a copy of it somewhere, but I'm not sure. This is collected works of Juhani Aho, part something. This is clearly another book that I've gotten for free from somewhere. This is more Juhani Aho. Juhani Aho is a 20th century realist writer, like a critical realist writer. I would recommend his stuff. A lot of it is available even in audio form, if you speak Finnish. Some of it is available in English too. His earliest story called When My Father Bought a Lamp, that's available in English. I'll link that in the description. And I think his earliest stuff is the best. When My Father Bought a Lamp, and then the following one, which is called The Railroad, both basically talking about the same theme, which is it's a realistic depiction of social development and the development of capitalism. And there's a fascinating analysis of the difference between Juhani Aho and Aleksis Kivi, because they're both talking about the rise of capitalism. But Alexis Kivi, he's talking about the early period of Finnish capitalism, when society is mostly not bourgeois, and the pre-capitalist society is still pretty strong. So at the beginning of the book, his characters are pre-commodity society, sort of peasant/hunters. At the end, they become civilized, they go to school, they integrate into bourgeois society, but they're strong, sort of larger-than-life, exaggerated characters. Whereas in the works of Juhani Aho, capitalism has developed very far, and the old pre-capitalist society has completely decayed. So all the people of the pre-capitalist society are like old, decrepit, even physically small, and also their sphere of life is very small. When my father bought a lamp, in that story, it just talks about how they live in a peasant family, then they buy a lamp, and then the whole life of the family changes. They can start doing stuff, they can start reading because they can see, and and then there's this guy who's like a farmhand who is not able to adapt to the new technological age, so he just moves out of the house into this like little shack where he still lives without a lamp and whatnot. And then in the railroad, very little happens. There's just these two old people who they hear about this thing called the railroad, and then they go see it, and the world they encounter is the world of capitalism, and it's very hostile to them. And then they just retreat into their own little like shack where they just live in their pre-capitalist existence, where almost nothing happens. Like they don't do anything. Every day is the same. Their life is very monotonous. Very little mental stimulation happening. But anyway, moving on. This is probably selected works of. It's the selected works of Minna Kant. Minna Kant is probably the greatest 20th century critical realist of our country. She was quite a radical person, considered herself a socialist, even though she was actually more like a reformist. However, the first one here, Köyhää kansaa, which translates to poor folk, just like the Dostoevsky story, it's a fantastic, absolutely ruthless critique of capitalism, how capitalism causes people to suffer. Lain mukaan, which means according to the law, is also another great story, which is probably one of the earliest depictions of revolt and rebellion in Finnish literature. So there is some like actual good stuff in there, but she was kind of like a religious utopian socialist, and also more like a reformist, not a real socialist, but still a real fighting democrat and a real great critical realist writer. These are various other things. Finnish writers. This is like a critical realist writer. This one I don't know. Linnankoski is more like a romantic, but progressive. And Ilmari Kianto is also another very mixed one. These are all, to be honest, very mixed. Juhani Aho as well, because many of these people, you can clearly see like the polarization, because Juhani Aho was very democratic and progressive and like criticized capitalism and whatnot. But then when the Civil War happened, he didn't like it. He didn't embrace the capitalist, but he didn't embrace the Reds either. And then during the Civil War, he mostly just writes lamenting that the killings that happen are like a tragedy and whatnot. So he exposes his petty bourgeois nature. He's a petty bourgeois Democrat. But Ilmari Kianto, he has a famous book called The Red Line, which is about the first Finnish elections and about like the big socialist victory in it. So he starts out as like a working class writer, kinda, but then he almost turns into a fascist later. So a very contradictory figure. Then moving on, so we got like 2 shelves of Finnish stuff. Then we have Russian stuff. This is, you can tell these are all like stuff that I've gotten for free. That's why this is so random. Like, this is Sholohov's Quiet Flows to Dawn. The first part is called Quiet Flows to Dawn. The second part is called The Dawn Flows Back to the Sea. Together they are known as the Quiet Dawn. It is considered a great socialist realist classic by the Soviet writer Mikhail Sholohov. But this is Quiet Flows to Dawn Part 2, and this is Quiet Dawn Part 4B, so it's not the complete book. This is clearly just something that I've gotten for free from somewhere. This is Red Cavalry by Isaac Babel, Trotskyist, revisionist. Don't remember where I got that. This one I remember buying from a bookstore. The Gorillas of the Taiga by Fadeev. Have not read this. The only one by Fadeev that I've read is, well, I mean, you'll never guess. Well, I mean, it's his most famous work, The Young Guard, about the Second World War. This, Nikolai Ostrovsky, How the Steel Was Tempered. If I had to pick one, like, what is the best socialist realist work to recommend to anybody, it's probably this. This is a lot of people consider this their favorite. How the Steel Was Tempered. I cannot praise it highly enough. Vasily Shukshin's Stenka Razin, about a famous peasant uprising. Okay, then there's Maxim Gorky, there's My Childhood, selected short stories, the Artemov family. Oh, the ones that look like this, they're ones that the library has gotten rid of. Because every now and then libraries, they get rid of books that people haven't borrowed for a while, and they sell them at a cheap price, so that's what that is. This is called Excerpts from the Works of French Classics. I think my mom got this for me at some point, but it just has, like, you know, you can see Rousseau, Voltaire, that kind of stuff. Very kind of random. You'll never guess what this is. Well, obviously it's Gogol, it's The Nose by Gogol, but it's actually an audiobook on cassette. I remember the library was selling those for 50 cents, so I bought it. Hero of Our Time by Lermontov, Captain's Daughter by Pushkin. Okay, there's more Gorky. That's some kind of selection from Gorky, Gogol, Taras Bulba by Gogol, The Portrait by Gogol. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about these because they're just, you know, great writers. Here we have more like sort of mythology and that kind of stuff. This is obviously Marco Polo. This is English. There's English fairy tales. This is Chinese stories. There's Mao Dun. There's some Lu Xuan in there. This is the Finnish national epic Kalevala, and this book called The Travels of Elias Lönnrot. Lönnrot was the Finnish scientist who collected the poems that make up the Kalevala. Oh, this is a book about Kalevala terms. It's kind of like a dictionary. But before the Kalevala came out, he released an earlier collection of Old Finnish and Karelian poems called the Kantelettar, which is what this is. Kantele is like an old Finnish harp instrument. So Kantelettar is like a woman playing the Finnish harp. I wanted to check this out in a bit more detail. It's a collection of folklore and those kinds of things. Let's see, it's got some Finnish stuff in there. It has the Odysseus, El Cid. Although these are probably not complete, these are probably abridged. Yeah, these can't be complete, there's so many of them. This is a Reader's Digest book, and in general, these are always terrible. The editions are always terrible. And Reader's Digest was also, I think, a CIA operation in Finland in the Cold War to publish like anti-communist news and material. And I really would like to read this collection of Chinese stories. There's Lu Xuan, The True Story of AQ, really good one. That's the only one of these that I've read. I think they were getting rid of these at the local library, and I noticed that Elvi Sinervo is one of the translators here, and she was a famous communist poet, but I doubt that she actually spoke Chinese. I think maybe she is translating from Russian. That would be my guess. This is pretty funny. I found this also for free, the Jordan Peterson book. Have not read it, but I got it just in case I want to read it. It's kind of funny because the fact that it was free means that somebody wanted to throw it away. Lewis Carroll, actually complete Lewis Carroll. Don't really know what to think about Lewis Carroll, to be honest. Got some H.G. Wells in here. This is actually a Soviet H.G. Wells book in English. Has the Time Machine, Invisible Man, and some other stuff. This is War of the Worlds, and this is a biography. Here we have Tolstoy on his own shelf, Anna Karenina, and War and Peace, and Resurrection. I really love Tolstoy. All of these are really good, but I mean, I guess, like, if I had to pick a favorite, I guess it has to be War and Peace, but I do like The Resurrection a lot. And also Anna Karenina. When people talk about who is the greatest writer in the world, I mean, Tolstoy is always, like, in the conversation. This is another very random one, because it's not really a fiction book, but I just have it here for some reason. It's The Happy Science by Nietzsche, and this is Julian Huxley biology book. These ones I've also gotten from somewhere for free. Huxley is a big reactionary, eugenicist, whatnot, so I would never buy that. And also, there's no need to buy Nietzsche. You can read Nietzsche for free on the internet. But yeah, then we clearly have Oscar Wilde, Picture of Dorian Gray. Again, a very sort of contradictory figure. He was a socialist, although not a scientific one, but a socialist nonetheless. He wrote in a vast number of different genres. Dorian Gray is his only novel. It's a decadence novel. A lot of his work is in the decadence movement. He was a big proponent of, like, art for art's sake, kinda, even though he doesn't consistently follow that at all, which is kind of good, but it seems I have Dorian Gray in two different versions, because this is in Finnish and these are in English. So here we got Dorian Gray, we have all of his short stories and The Importance of Being Earnest. So not all of his plays, and I also don't have his poems as far as I can tell. But The Importance of Being Earnest is a very political work, and it was actually rated very highly in the Soviet Union in the Stalin era. The Soviets definitely considered it his best work, and it's good, and it's also very funny. Very entertaining. I recommend that. Then we got Edgar Allan Poe. Complete works. 2 sets actually. One in Finnish, one in English. It doesn't have the poems though. So I have some of the poems here and some more stuff here. Poe, also a rebellious democratic figure, although he is kind of also in the decadence genre, together with Baudelaire. When I was saying that, like, these horror writers kind of also tie into actually good writers, like Dorian Gray is kind of like pseudo-gothic. It's not really, but it's kind of it. And then Edgar Allan Poe is definitely in the horror genre, kind of. And he also wrote in the detective genre too. His buddy Baudelaire actually even fought in the 1848 revolution, I think. When people talk about who is the greatest writer, well, Tolstoy is always in the conversation. Shakespeare is definitely also in the conversation. So this is complete Shakespeare. It's absurd to try to, like, put it all into one book, and it's also completely pointless to buy them because you can just read them for free on the internet. And some people probably say that it's horrible to read on the phone or on the computer screen, but it's also equally horrible to read in, like, a tiny print. This is even double columned, as you can see, so it's, like, absolutely absurd. What is my favorite Shakespeare play? Hamlet. I'm just so familiar with Hamlet, and all the little details have started to, like, grow on me. Like, Hamlet is actually pretty funny, and I mean intentionally funny. Like, the comedic parts are actually very funny. It's all, like, obviously Shakespeare is great all around. Then we have Don Quixote or Don Quixote. It's old Spanish, so I don't know how it's pronounced. People hype it up. People say that it's like, oh, it's so great, but it actually is. It's very, very funny. It gives a full realistic depiction of his time, of the different social classes and whatnot. And you might say, how is it realistic? Because he's like an unreliable, crazy narrator or whatnot. But it does give you, like, a good sense of what the society was like. Hasek and his very famous book Sveik, which I unfortunately have not read. Hasek, obviously a famous anti-war writer and a member of the Czechoslovak Communist Party. This is Father Goriot by Honoré de Balzac. I think the favorite author of Friedrich Engels. And Engels said that he learned more about French society of that era from Balzac than from any science book. which is pretty high praise. But the thing is that Balzac, he has like a huge corpus of works where he took it upon himself to like, okay, I'm going to explain the whole society throughout the course of all these different works. So you kind of have to read all of them, and I've only read this. It is good though, it is very good. I still kind of think that I maybe prefer Victor Hugo to Balzac, which is possibly an opportunist statement, but they're both good. This is a book about Goethe that I also got for free. Shakespeare's sonnets. And these are individual Shakespeare plays. I got Othello, and then I know one of them is Tempest. Oh yeah, and that's A Winter Night's Tale, yeah. I kind of randomly have one book of George Bernard Shaw. I've always had it, like somebody gave it to me when I was a little child, don't know why, and I've never read it, although I am interested because people say that Shaw is a great writer, and he also became a communist. I think he also won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And then these are Maupassant. I've read most, if not all, of Maupassant's short stories, but I haven't read the novels. I really enjoy them. He's definitely another great realist. And Maupassant is also another one of those actually good writers who have some connection to the horror genre as well, like I said earlier. He has a famous kinda horror story called Horla, where this guy is tormented by an invisible entity in his house, and it's unclear if it's supposed to be an alien or a demon or if the guy is just crazy. He has a lot of other supernatural stories as well, but those are mostly still realistic stories, mostly about, I think, the Franco-Prussian War of the 1870s. Then we got some Robert Louis Stevenson. We have Black Arrow and Treasure Island. Oh, actually, Robert Louis Stevenson is another horror author. He's the, isn't he the author of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? But anyway, Treasure Island is basically a book for children, but it's really funny, and I absolutely loved it as a kid. I don't know why I just say all of these are funny, but I think somehow certain things just eventually grow on you, where you start to think that they're really funny. This I got recently. Kerran kylläiseksi, it means... basically, it means like not hungry for once to have enough to eat, by Zsigmond Moritz, probably the greatest Hungarian writer of the 20th century. Got this recently, haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's just a short story. Then we are finally moving on to the big shelf. This is Jack London. One time I got a good deal, well, I considered it a good deal. It was like 10 euros or 15 euros, I forget, for like it was supposed to be complete Jack London. I don't think it's not actually complete, but it's almost, it's pretty close. They also had a complete Alexander Dumas. And this actually, well, actually no, this is also not complete, but it's almost complete. There's all these, this is all Alexander Dumas, and there's more, and then there's a couple ones that were not included that I had to get separately. I think you can probably learn a lot about French society from Alexander Dumas just because he wrote so many works, but it's more just entertainment. A lot of it is, mostly popular with children, as opposed to being like deeply political social criticism or some kind of super high level art, but it's good for what it is. I think that Alexander Dumas actually participated in the 1830 revolution, and I read somewhere that he helped write a book about the Decembrist uprising in Russia. But Jack London, obviously, oh boy, he's one of the most famous revolutionary writers, although he wrote all kinds of other stuff too, but he was obviously a famous socialist, an enemy of opportunism, an enemy of reformism. He's one of the great figures of the early American working class movement. And if I had to recommend one communist or socialist work of fiction, I would either recommend Ostrovsky's How the Steel Was Tempered, or I might even recommend The Iron Heel by Jack London, because it is that good. People hype it up a lot, but it actually is worth the hype. And people say like, oh, it's such a great anti-fascist novel and whatnot, but it's more than an anti-fascist novel. First of all, like, the style is fantastic. How it's written, it's so entertaining, so clear, you can understand everything, it's so memorable, everything in it is just fantastic. But it's more than an anti-fascist novel. It's a communist revolutionary novel. It's about the communist revolution. It's about a civil war and communist revolution. It's not only about fascism. It's about a civil war to build communism, modeled kinda on the Paris Commune and the 1905 revolution in Russia, although it is kinda like sci-fi and like dystopian. The only thing that I find weird in it is how the Communist Party described in the book. The Communist Party is more like, it's so conspiratorial that they don't like agitate among the masses so much. Instead, they're kind of like doing espionage, and then the capitalists try to infiltrate them, and then they infiltrate the capitalists, and it's kind of this secret war of like secret agents, instead of like organizing the masses to do strikes and uprisings and whatnot, even though that also happens, but it's not really described as much. So that's the only part that I think is a bit weird. This up here is a biography of Jack London called A Sailor on Horseback by Irving Stone, and that was originally published in English, and I heavily recommend it. I will try to remember to link that in the description. Then we have some Steinbeck that I unfortunately have not had a chance to read yet. Then we have Kipling. I also have not really read Kipling. Don't really know what to think about him. Obviously was like a big racist, colonialist, whatnot. The whole white man's burden that comes from Kipling. Then we got Mark Twain. People sometimes say that America doesn't have, like, that white people in America don't have a culture or whatnot. Well, they do kinda, because they have Mark Twain and they have Jack London, so there's a place to start. He also like wrote a ton of entertainment and not like so much hard-hitting political stuff. But the entertainment stuff too is, a lot of it is very realistic. It's actually based on his own life experiences, like being a sailor and digging for gold. Then we have more Finnish stuff. This is a big 7-part biography of a Finnish author named Zacharias Topelius, or Finnish people say Sakari Topelius. He was born in Swedish Finland, when Finland still was under Swedish domination. And he's an important figure in the Finnish national independence movement, because he's among the first people who really started to like advocate the idea that Finland is its own separate nation. It's its own separate language, obviously, and it has its own separate nationhood, although he still was so moderate that he didn't advocate Finnish independence from or secession from Sweden, but he still popularized the idea that Finland is a nation. And this is one of his sort of political works. It's called Book of Our Land, and it's basically a school book for children about Finnish geography, to popularize the idea that Finland has like different kinds of interesting geographical things. This is plays by him. He wrote in so many different genres. Like, he's written plays. This is more just talking about Finland. How do I have so many copies of this book? Like, I have 1, 2, 3. Don't remember where I got all of these other ones. I do remember where I got this. I got it from a building that was like mold damaged, and they said that a lot of the stuff has to be destroyed. So that's why it's in a plastic bag, sealed, airtight. I put it in a freezer for like a couple of years. I forgot that it was in there, and these ones too. And I was like, where are those books? And then I remembered that they've been in the freezer for like, yeah, a bit of a stupid story, but whatever. He has this big historical novel called The Medics Stories. It's like the frame story is about this like medic who was, I think, in the Great Northern War between obviously Finland, Sweden, and Russia, between Charles XII of Sweden and Peter I of Russia. But this actually goes through all the way from like Gustavus Adolphus up until the collapse of Finland, Sweden. It is kind of like sort of Alexander Dumas, kind of like entertaining, and it's also a bit maybe for like youth, although adults can also read it. But I really like it. It's very repetitive and formulaic, but other than that, it's very entertaining. You can find it in English too. You'll learn a lot of history from it. And Topelius also was like a progressive guy. So he was very much into like science and enlightenment and like rationality replacing dogma and superstition. And he was very much into the idea that history progresses. So this whole book is about historical progression. And this is actually a horror story that he wrote. It's more like a gothic, but it's kind of like a horror story. It's called The Green Chamber of the Manor of Linnaiset. And this is stories that he wrote for children. This is more stories he wrote for children. This is some of his like sort of fantasy stuff. He's written a lot of stuff. He's also written poems that have been turned into like popular songs. Okay, this is Somerset Maugham. He's supposed to be a realist writer, according to the Great Soviet Encyclopedia, which is a source that I frequently use. And I got these for free, so I grabbed them. First I found a bunch, then I found more. But so Somerset Maugham is supposed to be like a kind of good realistic writer, but he was also a big anti-communist. Like I think he was even doing espionage in the Soviet Union during the Civil War, as far as I can remember. Can you tell that I like Jules Verne? When I was a child, Jules Verne was my favorite writer. I'm pretty sure that I have everything by Jules Verne. They're not in order, though. This is his first, where was it, this? 5 Weeks in a Balloon, that's his first book. I have a bunch here, and then I have this whole shelf here. And, yeah, Jules Verne was also in favor of bourgeois democratic revolution, and even started to lean towards socialism, even though his works are also more entertaining than like high art, and they're not like hard-hitting political stuff usually. The books do criticize colonialism a lot, although he has a very noticeable Eurocentric tendency, but, well, he wasn't able to escape that. His idea for this book series is pretty cool, because almost all of his books are in this long series, which was just supposed to teach people about different countries and cultures and geography. So he has books that are set in every continent, and he did it on purpose because he specifically wanted it to be educational, so that's pretty cool. Then we got War of the Newts by Karel Čapek, Czech anti-bourgeois writer. That's pretty cool. I've had this book for like so long. Then we have Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens is also one of my favorites. This is Bleak House, Great Expectations. I really want to reread Great Expectations because I've forgotten kind of a lot of it. Nicholas Nickleby, Christmas Carol, Oliver Twist, Pickwick Papers, which is my favorite Charles Dickens book. It's so funny, but it's also like, if you want to talk about critical realism, this is critical. Like, even though Pickwick Papers is so funny, how he criticizes the capitalist system, the prison conditions, and the whole debt prison thing, it is brutal. So this is great stuff. Nicholas Nickleby again. Oh, I guess this is in English and this is in Finnish. And then we have, don't remember what this is. This is Great Expectations again for some reason. These ones I've clearly gotten for free. And, oh yeah, this is Tale of Two Cities, which I think is about the French Revolution. I haven't actually read that. Communists usually criticize Dickens for being too reformist, which is accurate, but credit where credit is due. He is great. He is still a reformist. And he's not like a fully socialist. He's just leaning towards socialism. But it's fantastic. And Pickwick Papers is so fucking funny. Like, it is. The part where I think it's Pickwick himself, where he passes out and then he wakes up and they ask him what's your name, and he says like punch, because they were drinking punch, and then he passes out. I just thought that was the funniest thing ever when I read that. Okay, we're almost at the end here. At the very bottom, you know what this is? This was another great find. Even though a bit unnecessary, because this is in public domain too, you can read it for free. And this is not the complete thing, this is only a certain kind of selection or a certain kind of version of it. But this is the Arabian Nights, also known as 1001 Nights. Collection of Middle Eastern and Asian folklore, sort of processed into this single story, kinda. Very fascinating. And I got this for 10 euros from a certain bookstore, which no longer exists, unfortunately. But they always had everything super, super cheap because everything they had was donations and they just wanted to get rid of it. They got so much stuff, they just had to get rid of it all the time. I don't think there is like a canonical version of this. There's other editions of it that have way more stories than this. But anyway, that's that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.